We can speak now to Mairead McGuinness, Vice President of the European Parliament and Irish MEP for the Fine Gael Party in Brussels, and Sammy Wilson, an MP for the Democratic Unionist Party, who's here with me in the studio. Welcome to both of you. Mairead McGuinness, first of all, do you expect tomorrow that the draft legal text will commit the UK to maintaining full alignment with EU regulations in the absence of other solutions?
Yes, we do expect this text to be published tomorrow, and I think that what we expect to see is the translation of the agreement pre-Christmas into legal text, including that fallback position, because you've outlined in the programme there the three options. And clearly the first option is the best, that we reach a situation where this isn't a problem. But in the absence of that, tomorrow I would expect that in the legal text there is a recognition of that third option, that if we fail on both one and two, that we have a fallback position which secures our concerns around the border on the island of Ireland, which are concerns shared by the UK, the European Union, and in particular my constituents of Midlands North West that are south of the border. So yes, tomorrow I'll be looking at this text very clearly, and just this morning I've come from a meeting where Guy Verhofstadt, the Parliament's negotiator, has very clearly outlined, and I just looked down at my notes here, where he said, the protocol on Ireland is key. The future, there can be no divergence in norms, regulations and standards between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. But that is, if you like, the third option if all else fails.
Right.
And I think people should read it in that context, rather than, as some members of the committee this morning read it, as almost a row immediately. I think we need to be very careful about how we interpret the text tomorrow.
Right, but by full alignment, as you have just explained, it is yours and the EU's understanding that that would mean entirely adopting or replicating every single EU regulation.
Well, anything that would avoid us having semblance of a border, a hard border, any change to the relationships to what happens on the island of Ireland, as the third and final, if you like, the final, offer in terms of what should be done. But the first and second are also on the table, and therefore, from my perspective, and I spoke this morning in committee, I welcome a repeat of the commitment to the Irish issue. It was front and centre of the discussions before Christmas.
Sure.
It was one of the three priorities, and indeed we wondered whether we would actually get to reaching sufficient progress. We got wording with some difficulty, and I know you have a DUP colleague, and I'm looking forward to hearing his contribution. I know that they had particular concerns which were taken on board and which have to be dealt with by the United Kingdom within the United Kingdom.
Let me ask him.
It behoves both sides of these negotiations this week to move forward in a positive framework.
Right. Sammy Wilson, if the legal agreement, in the way Mairead McGuinness has just outlined, does commit the UK to effectively remaining in the EU's institutions as a backstop for solving the Irish question, should the UK sign?
Well, I think that, first of all, there's a gap in what Mairead has outlined, because, of course, the agreement didn't just talk about the relationship between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. The agreement, and it was signed by the EU, also talked about the unbreakable relationship between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. And we would expect to see that outlined in the legal agreement as well. They can't pick and choose and simply say we're only interested in the Northern Ireland Irish Republic relationship. They have signed up to ensuring that there will be no change in the constitutional position of Northern Ireland. They've signed up to the Belfast Agreement commitment that there will be no change without the consent of the people of Northern Ireland. So therefore the legal agreement must also reflect that aspect of the December agreement.
Do you accept that, Mairead McGuinness?
I think that issue, this article or paragraph 50, I've spoken about paragraph 49. Paragraph 50 was an internal discussion to meet the concerns of the DUP, who are, of course, supporting the Conservative government.
And should it be part of this legal text?
As I see that, it is an issue for the... I'll just finish my point, if I may. As I see it, that is something that the United Kingdom needs to bear in mind and to be able to deliver on. But I would rather go back to the starting point here. We should, in this new new year and with time running out, focus on the best option, which is option one. And I would remind both Sammy Wilson and your listeners that this morning Guy Verhofstadt was in very much the mood of saying we want a positive relationship with the United Kingdom. That's in the interest not just of politics but of people in my country on both sides of the border.
Well, let me put that.
And therefore I think that if we are at this stage fighting before we see the text, I think that's a little bit... I'm sad to hear
that what you're doing, Sammy Wilson?
No, I'm not.
There are issues.
I'm not. Don't forget, it was the EU who insisted that this had to be an agreement. The December agreement was an agreement which had to be signed up by all parties. They had to be happy with the text. We had to be happy with the text. The text includes paragraph 50. Paragraph 50 makes it very clear that there can be no separation of Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. And if, but it's an act of bad faith.
No, Mairead, hang on a second.
It's an act of bad faith. If already the EU are saying, well, by the way, yes, this agreement had 50 paragraphs, but see, as far as the 50th paragraph is concerned, nothing to do with us. They shouldn't have signed up to it if that were the case.
Right, but Sammy Wilson, is it your position, though? Is it your position then on that basis? No, hang on, because I'm going to put a question, Mairead. Hang on, I'll come back to you. Is it your position, Sammy Wilson, that you want Northern Ireland to have a veto over the capacity of Great Britain to diverge?
No, it is not. The United Kingdom as a whole voted to leave the EU. And the United Kingdom as a whole should leave the EU on the same basis. That's not a Northern Ireland veto, that is a UK decision. And all we are asking is that the result of the referendum be respected, the result of the agreement in December be respected, and the EU and certainly the Irish can't have it the best of both worlds, where they say we had to have an agreement in December, and by the way, see when it comes to February, there's parts of that agreement we simply want to throw out the window.
But isn't it true that this is at your door, Sammy Wilson, yours and the British government? The majority of people in Northern Ireland voted to remain. Only your party advocated leaving. The British government has decided to leave the single market and the customs union. Why is it up to the Irish or the EU to come up with a solution? Why haven't you come up with a solution to not having a hard border?
Well, we have, and all of those solutions to date, the EU and the Irish have not even been prepared to look at. In August of last year, David Davis gave a very detailed paper as to how you could have a virtual border between Northern Ireland and Irish Republic. The EU Parliament commissioned a report from the former director of the WTO, Lars Carlston, who also said it was possible to have a virtual border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, and none of those options are even being considered by the Irish government, let alone the EU.
Well, Mairead McGuinness, is that the case? The argument all along has been that until we talk about the future trade relationship, we can't come up with solutions, technical or otherwise. So are you saying that the EU has already decided that that's a non-starter and some of the solutions that Sammy Wilson has talked about in terms of a virtual border?
Can I just reassure Sammy Wilson of one thing? I have no desire to see borders anywhere. In fact, the whole reason of my being in politics and being part of the European Union is not to have borders between people or countries. But clearly now that the United Kingdom is leaving, and I think you were right to reference the fact that in Northern Ireland the majority voted to remain, and to some extent the DUP vetoed that decision, but I accept that that is the situation. But be reassured, we don't want borders either. What we have are three possible solutions to a very serious problem that I'm sure Sammy Wilson shares my concerns about. We need to build relationships on the island of Ireland. They're difficult at the moment, and I believe that any going backwards, any dividing of people psychologically and indeed physically is not healthy for the island of Ireland and our peace process.
So what about a virtual border?
Let us begin with a positive outlook with option one, and see that in the text tomorrow what we're looking at is in the withdrawal agreement, if all else fails, we have to have a safeguard. Sure. And I think that's in all our interests, because we don't want to be in October of this year looking at something which is a disaster. So prepare well, and therefore we won't fail.
But you haven't answered my question about the solution that has been put forward, about a virtual border, about a technical solution to keep the border as soft as possible. Do you accept that those suggestions should be looked into?
Well, what I accept is, and I've looked at these reports, I've been part of the discussion on them, is that what I am arguing for, it is impossible given the red lines of the United Kingdom, is that the situation today, which is the best option, should prevail. staying in the single market and customs union. Anything after that causes me anxiety and concern, and that's why we have the fallback option. So when you say, should we consider these other options, our choice, our best consideration should be given to have this strong relationship, good trading partnership with the United Kingdom, not to look at technical solutions, because, may I finish briefly? Technical solutions do not get us over relationships and the political issues which clearly still prevail when it comes to the island of Ireland. But I think we should work together on it.
And in that answer rests the nub of the problem, that the Irish insist and believe that we should stay within the single market and the customs union, even though the people of the United Kingdom voted to leave. The EU negotiators believe that as well. And our worry is this, that the legal text, which will be produced tomorrow or Thursday, whenever it's going to be produced, from the leaks that we have had so far, only looks in detail at one option, that is the fallback option, which would require full regulatory alignment, because there is no interest in negotiating on the terms that the people of the United Kingdom have decided, namely that we leave the EU and we have a clean break with the EU. And if that's the case, the legal text will not only be unacceptable to the DUP, I suspect that the legal text will be unacceptable to the British government.
I mean, Mairead McGuinness, are we headed to a position of pure brinkmanship? The British refuse to commit to staying in the single market or the customs union, and the EU refuses to agree to any technical solutions, and a hard border goes up by default.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, as long as I'm in politics, a hard border will not go up on the island of Ireland. And let me just say to Sammy Wilson, and I'm trying to be conciliatory here with some difficulty, I don't think we're really should be fighting over this. Remember that the farmers who voted to leave, the DUP supporters who voted to leave the European Union, I accept their vote, not the logic of it. They want their lambs to be processed in factories in the south of Ireland and sold to France. And they want that to continue when the United Kingdom leaves the European Union. If we have this so-called managed divergence, in fact ambitious managed divergence, which I've heard from the UK side, how can that happen? So let's get real, let's get practical, let's get back to grassroots, solve this problem in the interests of our people, and perhaps move the big politics to one side.
All right, let me come back, because we're running out of time, Mairead.
On the basis of negotiation rather than confrontation.
All right, Sammy Wilson, given the risks to Ireland's economy, because it would be devastating to the economy on the island if there isn't a deal that is done, is it your position that the Irish government are acting purely in political bad faith?
They're not only acting in political bad faith, they're acting in a way which must be incomprehensible to many of the people who operate businesses in the Irish Republic, because this fixation with the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic hides the main issue, and that is that the vast bulk of the Irish market is not in Northern Ireland. They sell 6 times more to the rest of the United Kingdom, and therefore, in concentrating on the Northern Ireland-Irish border and wanting regulatory alignment between those two parts of the island, are they really saying they're prepared to sacrifice the regulatory alignment which we required to enable them to sell their goods in GB? Because if they do, then I think that will be the real devastation for their businesses.
Right. Mairead McGuinness, very briefly, Boris Johnson says it's as easy as dealing with the boundary between 2 London boroughs. You could deal with it in the way that we have the congestion charge in the capital. Do you agree?
Well, first of all, can I just say there is no bad faith on behalf of myself as an Irish politician or my government. I think I would reject that absolutely. When it comes to Boris Johnson's comments, which I read and heard with some interest, I think Sammy Wilson will be the first to say that the United Kingdom is a different country than the Republic of Ireland. We are talking about 2 sovereign, United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, and therefore the comparison doesn't quite fit.
All right.
It does fit, Mairead, and indeed, if you look at it, we have a different tax regime in Northern Ireland from the Irish Republic. VAT, excise duty is different, yet billions of pounds worth of goods cross that border, taxes paid, and not a lorry is stopped to check the goods, because through virtual methods, through IT, through electronic invoicing, those taxes are collected by both the Irish government and the British government. If it can work on that basis, it can work after we leave the EU.
We have to leave it there. Mairead McGuinness and Sammy Wilson, thank you both very much.